From the moment you first learned to walk and speak, the world began shaping you. Every word of praise, every look of disappointment, carved into you a silent message. This is acceptable. That is not. Be polite. Don't get angry. Smile. Behave. And so, like every other child, you began to separate yourself from yourself. You tucked away your frustration. You buried your jealousy. You choked down your fear. And in its place, you built a version of you the world would accept. But what happened to all the pieces you had to hide? They didn't vanish. They became your shadow. This story isn't one of quick fixes or feel-good affirmations. It's not about pretending to be positive while silently falling apart inside. This is about truth. The raw, uncomfortable, liberating kind. The kind that makes you squirm before it sets you free. Everyone carries a shadow. It's not a monster lurking under your bed, but something far more intimate. It is the sum of every feeling you denied, every thought you repressed, every impulse you judged and locked away. And it is alive, right now, shaping your emotions, your relationships, your choices. You feel it when you lash out in anger and don't know why. When guilt clings to you for no clear reason. When you collapse under sadness that seems to have no name. The shadow isn't just a part of you. It is a force within you, one that you ignore at your peril. And yet most people do just that. They walk through life in armor, wearing masks so polished, they forget what lies beneath. They speak of balance while seething inside. They smile through grief, laugh through loneliness, deny their own suffering in the name of strength. But repression doesn't make the pain go away. It simply buries it deeper. And what is buried in the unconscious does not rest. It festers, it grows, and eventually it begins to steer your life from the dark. Why do you keep attracting the same kind of relationships that drain you? Why do you sabotage yourself the moment success is within reach? Why does fear grip you when everything seems to be going well? You think these are coincidences. They're not. They are symptoms, clues that something unseen is pulling the strings. Carl Jung gave this force a name, the shadow. And he warned that until you become aware of it, it will continue to control you, and you will call it fate. There are people walking around today who seem calm, composed, kind, but beneath their polished exterior lives a storm of rage, jealousy, bitterness, resentment, terror. The more perfect the persona, the more repressed the shadow. And when it breaks through, because it always does, it does so in ways that destroy. A cruel word, a panic attack, a reckless decision, a silent, slow slide into depression. And then they ask, "What's wrong with me?" There is nothing wrong with you. There is only something you haven't faced. The journey toward emotional strength begins with one truth. You are not just your light. You are also your darkness. And that darkness is not evil. It is unclaimed power. There is fire in your anger, energy in your envy, protection in your fear. The goal is not to erase these emotions. It is to understand them, integrate them, transform them from saboteurs into allies. Imagine what it would be like to no longer be afraid of your emotions, to feel anger without being controlled by it, to recognize fear without letting it stop you, to face sadness without drowning in it. This is what happens when the shadow is brought into the light. You don't become someone new. You become someone whole. And the process starts with observation. Look at your daily life, the person who irritates you beyond reason, the situations you avoid, the judgments you hurl without thinking. All of these are mirrors, reflections of the parts of you that you don't want to see. That coworker you can't stand. Maybe they reflect your own unacknowledged ambition. That friend you envy. Maybe they've dared to express what you've long buried. The shame you feel when you make a mistake. It points to the perfectionist in you that's terrified of being seen as flawed. Every projection, every overreaction, every uncomfortable emotion is a thread. And if you're brave enough to pull it, it will lead you straight to the parts of you that need healing the most. But make no mistake, this work is not easy. It requires you to sit with discomfort, to strip away illusions, to let go of the stories you've told yourself about who you are and what you're not. It's messy, it's painful, but it's real. And what's real has power. When you begin to work with the shadow, strange things happen. You stop blaming the world for your suffering. You begin to see the patterns in your pain. You become less reactive, more reflective. The things that once triggered you begin to lose their grip because you see them for what they are. Echoes of wounds that are finally being acknowledged. You begin to reclaim yourself piece by piece. And something else changes too. People around you begin to feel it. They sense a calmness in you, a steadiness, not because you've silenced your emotions, but because you've made peace with them. You no longer need to defend your worth. You no longer need to prove or pretend. You walk into a room without needing to wear a mask. This is emotional strength. This is what it means to be unshakable, not immune to pain, but rooted in truth. But there's a force that works against this transformation, one that's been with you just as long as the shadow. It's the persona, the social mask you've crafted over a lifetime to keep you safe, liked, accepted. The smiling face when you're miserable. The polite silence when your boundaries are being crushed. The agreeable nod when your soul is screaming, no. You created this mask for survival. But now, it's suffocating you. Because the more tightly you cling to who you think you should be, the more you betray who you really are. That betrayal shows up as fatigue, as tension, as a sense of hollowness, even when life looks good on the outside. You wonder why you're not happy. You wonder what's missing. What's missing is you. You've hidden pieces of yourself for so long, you forgot they were ever yours to begin with. But it's not too late. And it doesn't require a radical overhaul of your life. Just a decision to start being honest, to start watching your reactions instead of justifying them, to start paying attention to the stories you tell about yourself, and most of all, to begin listening to the quiet parts within you that you've long ignored. Because your shadow is not your enemy, it's your teacher. It's the keeper of truths you haven't yet been ready to face. And now, maybe for the first time, you are. There's a moment in this journey when everything begins to shift. Not because you've mastered anything yet, but because you've stopped lying to yourself. You no longer say, "I'm fine," when you're not. You no longer dismiss the voice inside you that whispers when something's off. And you start to notice just how much of your life has been driven by forces you didn't even know were there. It hits you in the smallest moments. You're having a conversation, and suddenly your heart races, not from danger, but from an old fear of not being accepted. You watch someone succeed, and instead of celebrating them, something in you tightens, a feeling you don't want to admit, a thought you're afraid to finish. But now, you don't turn away. You stay. You ask the question, what is this trying to show me? That question, asked with sincerity, is the beginning of transformation. Because most people never ask. They live at the surface, reacting, pretending, blaming. They treat symptoms and ignore the cause. But you've started to see that every emotion, no matter how painful or uncomfortable, is a messenger, and the shadow is full of them. Some come loud, rage, panic, jealousy. Others come quiet, apathy, numbness, a vague sense that something isn't right. But all of them carry information about what you need, about what you've abandoned, about what you're still afraid to feel. And here's the truth most never want to admit. What you don't feel, you can't heal. You can't make peace with what you haven't acknowledged. You can't move on from what you haven't even met. And so the real work begins, not in fixing yourself, but in facing yourself. It's not about becoming better. It's about becoming whole. That means inviting in the parts of you that you once exiled. The needy part, the angry part, the one that craves validation, the one that longs to scream. You sit with them not to judge, but to listen. You say, I see you, I hear you, and I'm not sending you away this time. That's when the healing begins. Because once you stop rejecting yourself, you stop needing the world to approve of you. Once you stop hiding from your emotions, you stop fearing them. And once you stop performing for acceptance, you begin to experience something rare: freedom. Emotional freedom is not the absence of pain. It's the absence of fear around your pain. It's the ability to feel what you feel without being swept away by it, to own your darkness without being devoured by it, to stand in the storm of your inner world and remain grounded. Not because the storm has passed, but because you've stopped trying to run from it. This is how emotional resilience is built, not in the absence of struggle, but in your willingness to be present with it. But the shadow isn't the only force in the unconscious. As you go deeper, you begin to meet other figures, strange, powerful archetypes that seem to rise from nowhere. Dreams become more vivid, emotions more complex. You begin to feel as though you're being pulled into something larger than yourself. That's not your imagination. That's the collective unconscious at work. Jung called them archetypes, universal patterns that live within all of us. They aren't fantasies. They're inherited blueprints. And they don't just sit there quietly. They move, they guide, they challenge. The anima and animus, the feminine within the man, the masculine within the woman, are some of the first to appear. They show up in your relationships, your desires, your dreams. Maybe you dream of a mysterious woman who feels both familiar and foreign. She speaks in symbols. She leads you somewhere unknown. That's the anima. Or maybe you, as a woman, find yourself drawn to strong, intellectual male figures who speak with authority. That's the animus. These archetypes act as bridges to the unconscious. They draw you inward. They stir emotions you can't explain. And if you listen closely, they reveal what's been buried deep within. But not all archetypes are allies. Just when you think you've made progress, when your shadow feels less threatening, when you've begun to walk more authentically, another figure steps onto the stage, the trickster. He's not here to help. He's here to test. The trickster shows up in the moment you start to feel superior, when you begin to think you've figured it all out, when you start to wear your awareness like a badge. He slips into your mind and whispers, "You're better than them. You've transcended. You're awakened." And just like that, you fall into a new illusion, a spiritual ego, a higher mask. The trickster's game is subtle. He doesn't destroy you with fear. He distracts you with pride. He convinces you that the work is done when it's only just begun. And that's why humility is essential on this path. Because every insight, every breakthrough, every new awareness is just another doorway. And the deeper you go, the more you realize how vast the inner world truly is. This isn't a linear path. It doesn't end. It spirals, and every loop takes you to a deeper layer of truth. You begin to feel it in your body, a sense of integration, of inner alignment. Your emotions, once chaotic, begin to organize, not into neat categories, but into a kind of rhythm. You feel anger and don't explode. You feel sadness and don't collapse. You feel desire and don't shame yourself for it. You are no longer trying to fix yourself. You are trying to know yourself. That shift changes everything. Because when you know yourself, you stop reacting blindly. You stop clinging to roles. You stop hiding behind the mask. And you begin to live from a place that is raw and real and profoundly grounded. But here's the hard truth. This work never ends. The shadow doesn't disappear. It evolves. It changes shape. It follows you into every new stage of life. And each time you grow, it grows with you. Not to torment you, but to remind you. There is still more to discover, more to feel, more to become. You won't always want to do the work. There will be days you retreat, moments you forget, times you numb yourself just to make it through. That's okay. This isn't about perfection. It's about commitment, a quiet, steady willingness to return to yourself again and again, because the alternative is far more dangerous. To ignore the shadow is to live in fear of your own mind, to wear a smile while dying inside, to sabotage joy, to repeat pain, to become a stranger to yourself in your own skin. And you deserve more than that. You deserve to know who you are beneath the layers. You deserve a life that feels real, not because it's easy, but because it's yours. And the only way to get there is through the dark. Somewhere along this path, you realize something that shakes you deeper than anything else. The version of yourself you've been defending for years, the polished one, the strong one, the good one, was never the full picture. It was a fragment, a performance, a shield you carried through a world that didn't always feel safe. And while it may have protected you, it also imprisoned you. Because the truth is, no amount of pretending can make you whole. Only courage can do that. The courage to face the parts of you that feel unlovable. The courage to admit your insecurities, your regrets, your buried rage. The courage to sit with your grief and say, "You belong too." That's not weakness, that's mastery. Because most people never get there. They stay trapped in the performance, clinging to the mask, hoping no one will see behind it, hoping they don't have to either. But you're not most people. You're here, listening, watching, feeling. And that means something in you is already shifting. You no longer just want to appear strong. You want to be strong. You no longer crave surface-level peace. You want the kind that runs so deep, no storm can shake it. And you're starting to see that this kind of peace doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from walking through it, fully, deliberately, with your eyes open and your heart unwilling to close. Because when you've made peace with your shadow, the world loses its power to control you. You stop being manipulated by praise or paralyzed by criticism. You stop chasing perfection and start living from presence. You stop looking for validation outside and begin to generate it from within.